All right, it's 12:30, so we're going to get started back up so we can keep everything moving forward. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. I made the announcement before lunch, but I haven't heard if anybody collected it. So if you're missing an iPhone, they did find one. It's at the at the registration desk. I have the distinct privilege to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Fernando Tomlinson. Sorry, I can't talk. He will be speaking on Ransomware Playbook, Illuminating Artifacts for Enriched Analysis. And I appreciate everybody being here, and I will turn it over to Mr. Fernando.
Thank you. All right, just want to make sure everybody can hear me. Perfect, in the back. All right, so let's get into this. So a little bit about myself. Fernando Tomlinson, as he mentioned, technical manager at Mandiant, subsidiary company of Google. Prior to that, retired U.S. Army, right here from the home of cyber warrant officer, signal warrant officer, a couple tours to Afghanistan. Did a lot of great stuff while serving. If you go to Army Cyber, you'll probably see a room as more associated with me. But nonetheless, also an adjunct cybersecurity professor, teaching a number of cybersecurity-related topics. It's an opportunity for me to give back because I didn't start here. I had people that were in front of me in which I could see, learn from, gain insights from to kind of help build me up. So I think that's incredibly important to be able to do that for others. Myself and a few other people, namely Pete DiGiorgio, who you see out there, another guy, Alex Durkis. We run a platform called Under the Wire, a training platform helping people learn and really get comfortable with the language of PowerShell. We were joking the other day. We started that back in 2015. Here we are in 2023. It started in the parking lot of a building in MacDill Air Force Base off of CD, and now it's grown expeditiously. So, and a number of other sites associated with me all over the web. But enough about me, because that's not what you're here to hear me talk about. You're really here to hear me talk about ransomware. So let's start with some stats, right? If you're not familiar, Mandiant produces what they call a M-Trends report, and they produce this every year. So the one that recently came out a couple of months ago was for the year of 2022. And what we've noted based upon the analysis and investigations that we've done is essentially 70% of the ransomware cases we have, the entity was notified by an external source, right? 30% of those entities were notified from an internal source. What's really intriguing, or maybe a little bit comical in some respect, is another number that I don't have up here, because of that 70% that was external notification, a good grip, a decent amount of that was the threat actor notifying the client, right? Which is a little bit more concerning in some respect. But looking at who's impacted here, well, we could look at another publication, and this is coming from our friends over at the FBI from their Internet Crime Report. So when we look at all of the defense industrial base, there were 16 sectors in which that were impacted by this, and really for the year of 2022, over 2,300 complaints to the FBI, cases if you will, that were associated with ransomware. Now, that should seem like a lot to you, but the more staggering number is the number that we don't know about, and that is the true cases that have taken place where people don't report it. Maybe they've reached out to a Mandiant, maybe they've reached out to another company, maybe they've suffered in silence, for lack of better words, and tried to get over it as quickly as humanly possible. That number is more staggering. Also, this is really talking about US. It isn't talking about other entities around the world. This ransomware pandemic or epidemic, however you want to look at it, isn't just a US problem, it's a world problem, if you will. So these actors, some of the most heartless people I've ever seen in my life, right? Like, they could care less about what you are going through and what your organization is going through. And they will hit you at any time, and it doesn't matter what's going on, right? So here's an example where literally this is me. I took a little PTO. Best way to decompress here is to go to Vegas. So my wife and I literally just landed, turned my phone on, and ended up picking up a ransomware case for a rather large company. Obviously, can't talk about it here, but I had to take a break, sit down, and actually gather what was going on and start that investigation. Now, this is not within the last 45 days, so some of you have seen the news and stuff, and it has nothing to do with that. No, it does not. It was not a local company in Vegas. But I shared this photo, one, because my wife was not happy, and she snapped it. But two, I think it captures a lot. One, it captures the company. Two, it captures Vegas. But really, I'm really trying to highlight that these actors, they don't care. And when you're in this field, right, as a firefighter, if you will, in the digital sphere, you have a responsibility to respond. Now, looking at this, these threat actors, some of them are a little bit more advanced than others, but largely speaking, the ground soldiers, if you will, those individuals, they follow a playbook. Every now and then they may go off script, but for the most part, they follow a playbook. And when we look at the playbook definition here from Webster, it's telling us that one or more plays in a book form. All right, yeah, I think we got that. A notebook containing a diagrammed football plays, right? Player plays. I think we got that as well. A stock of usual tactics or methods. And really, when we rack and stack which ones are most applicable to what we're talking about today, it's really going to be 3 first and then maybe 2 in some form of fashion, or really maybe all 3. Now, because we have realized that there is some form of playbook, now we want to get a hold of the playbook. Well, when there's smoke, there's sure to be some fire to follow. So let's fast forward here to the Conti leaks, right? It was a bad time for them. It was a good time for us. Because while they were going through their mess and things were starting to appear on the web, it was a great opportunity to confirm some of these hypotheses and thoughts that were already kind of flowing, if you will. And this is a actual manual. Now, it's been translated to English because it wasn't in English, but it speaks to really the process that one of their actors would follow as part of an overarching campaign. I mean, step 1 here, if you will, find the company's website. Well, why do we want to do that? Well, we want to figure out if the juice is worth the squeeze here. Are we talking about a mom and pop that isn't going to be able to pay, right? Are we talking about a potential company that has, I don't know, DoD level attention? Probably don't want to mess with that one either. We need to figure out how do we get somewhere in the middle where it's worth our time and effort and there's some form of payoff. So let's do some research. Now, further down in this manual is more information for us, more information that we can certainly glean from. And while I don't have the whole manual here, which I would recommend you go download, you can get it off a quick and easy Google search, and just read over it, right? It's actually kind of entertaining, and some of it may look familiar to you based upon what you do in the world already. But a little bit further down, we have a portion where it's talking about uploading data, because the name of the game is double extortion, and in some respect, triple and quadruple extortion, right? Gone are the days where an actor is just holding your environment for ransom, right? And you'd pay a fine, or not a fine, you'd pay a fee, if you will, and then be able to get a decryptor and get that information back. Because people are starting to do backups, and now that's debatable, but people are just less inclined to pay in some respect. Organization dependent. So double extortion, I'm going to steal your data, right? And I'm going to either release it or sell it or whatever, and then that starts to get people's attention a little bit more. Now, in my experience, I've seen still people don't want to pay for data that's been taken as well. But how does that data get out the network? Well, there's a number of different platforms that's been observed by myself, colleagues, and really other people in this space that are notorious for data exfiltration. And even when we look at the Conti Leak Guide, it talks about using mega uploads, right? And it talks about rclone. And I don't know about you, but I've been in this space, either IT or cyber, for over 20 years now, And I haven't been in an environment yet where I've seen, in a legitimate manner, Mega or R clone used. Not to say that they aren't ever used legitimately. I would just bet my left pinky toe, because I think I could still walk without that, that if I were to see them in an environment, there's a good indication that there's some maliciousness probably happening. So in the guide itself, it is telling these actors that's what they should do, right? And it goes on and it names a couple of more. As a defender, as a forensicator, as somebody who responds to these types of events, this is a goldmine, right? This is like the welcome to the team book, if you will. So fast forwarding a little bit, and again, I can't stress how much you should probably look at that guide in this entirety and some of the other documents, but fast forwarding a little bit here, I think this quote is like key, right? If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video is worth 1,000,000. And the reason I bring this up right now is because when we think about this, for those in this space, engagements, clients, what have you, they tend to reach out to you Friday afternoon, Friday evening, right? I think it's Monday, something potentially happens. Tuesday, they identify it. Wednesday, Thursday, they try to figure out what's going on. And then Friday is like, oh yeah, we probably need to call somebody. And it's like Friday evening. But nonetheless, was working a case where LSAS was being dumped. There was another instance where NTDS.DIT was being dumped, the Active Directory database. They called us in, and they had some technology that we were able to utilize to get some metadata off a machine. We tasked that technology to get that metadata for us so we could start analysis, and it was not retrieving that data in a timely fashion that we felt was indicative of a good platform, if you will. We talked to the client. We asked the admin, did he have a way to access the method or access this system, if you will, in a abstracted way to reduce really any potential harm? And he did. It was a virtual machine. They were able to use EXXI, log into that cluster, and then from a console perspective, pull it up. So we wanted to get on Teams and share screens with him so we can help him understand what the problem was so we could get the data. When we did this and he logged into EXXI and console in, somebody was already logged into the system. And we're like, do you guys use NetScan in your environment? He's like, what's that? Well, I know you don't use it because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be something that a threat actor is using to be able to do recon in your environment. So, me being the person that I am, I started recording, right? So for the most part, this is a snippet that I tried to block out stuff that's not important here of about 3.5 hours where we were watching the threat actor live in the environment, right? I had never seen anything like this before. I've done a lot of things in my life, but they're using NetScan. Wasn't shocking because a lot of ransomware cases do that. They're looking for open shares. They're in here looking at particular users, changing passwords for a user, NL test, DC list, trying to figure out what trusts are out there in the environment, looking at group membership up above that's kind of blacked out. This is all standard TTP. Now, at the time, we didn't know this was pre-ransomware because all we had was the DIT was being dumped, LSAS was being dumped. But we're watching this after, and we're watching it live. And there's no better evidence than this. Well, you said in the report that they did this and they did this. Where's your evidence? Well, let me show you the video, right? So 3.5 hours, we watched the actor do that. At some point in here, we also watched the actor up top there, top right, you kind of see, well, top center, I have it circled pass. The threat actor was looking for files that contain the word pass. Why do you think he's doing that? Always looking for passwords. Do you think he found some? Well, there's a lot of things that came back that I blacked out. Now, talk about an uncomfortable conversation because the client is sitting here watching this live with us, and they're like, oh, John Bob, credit card information, why is that on there? I'm like, I don't know. What's funny to me, though, is the threat actor is skipping over stuff like that. What he's looking for, or she, they, are looking for are particular passwords for a different network based upon a trust. So they're trying to laterally move. They're trying to establish their position in the environment. And as we talk about really the methodology and stages of a ransomware campaign, they were very early. Now, fast forwarding upon this a little bit, again, this whole thing is like 3.5 hours, we see them lay down AnyDesk, right? AnyDesk is a legitimate tool used for remote access. You've probably seen me talk about AnyDesk in a previous talk at another time. But nonetheless, they had a portable version of AnyDesk. They used it. They connected to AnyDesk or to the system via AnyDesk. And then they brought over a file called uvs.zip. And really what that file is, when expanded, is a program called Universal Virus Sniffer. UVS, Universal Virus Sniffer. And when you look at this tool, one of these freeware type tools, its claim to fame is that it will help you rid a system of rootkits. So on surface level, it seems like a tool that a admin, defender, somebody would be able to utilize to get rid of rootkits on their system. Perfect. Well, let me show you what the threat actor was actually doing. Well, we'll come back to what this looks like in here in a minute. But what the threat actor was doing was they were looking for security tools on the system, treating it like a rootkit, and they were neutering it. Well, that's not what the program is made for. But by golly, that's what the threat actor was doing. Which really spoke to why we were not able to see the system. And that security tool I mentioned earlier, we couldn't get the data that we were looking for, because this threat actor was starting to neuter that communication to their security application, if you will. Now, this comes up, right? And I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I venture to say that this is not an actor of U.S. descent, right? I'm going to, this is what I should have been doing in Vegas, putting it all on black 18, right? This is not an actor of U.S. descent, right? So this was great, though, when it came time for report writing, because this was the biggest screenshot I could have ever done with red arrows all over the place. This isn't shocking, right? You start doing ransomware enough, you start getting a feel for some of these things. But watching the threat actor live was super enlightening for those 3.5 hours. Now, in the end, what's not shown after this is the threat actor started using the admin who was helping us. He started using that person's account. And if there's ever a time where you might have felt violated, I think that's a time where you really feel violated. This person was an enterprise admin. We're watching this. It's all not really fun and games. It's never fun and games. But the threat actor opens a shell, run as, puts in this guy's name. He's like, oh, he's like, wait, that's me. He's using my stuff. He starts hyperventilating, like really, right? And he starts to cut this connection off from the threat actor. That's fine. We don't own the risk. That's a client decision. Threat actor knows something is now going on. Threat actor skips steps 5, 6, 7 and jumps straight to 9, right? Which is really smash and grab, if you will. And they launched their ransomware. That was the very moment we realized this was a ransomware case. And because we were right there on the ground of it actually happening, we were able to neuter that and the avenue in which they were able to get in. The impact to the business, 3 machines, one of which was a DC. That's neither here nor there. The business at large could still go on. Now, that's a luck thing, if you will, but really being able to identify some of the things that threat actors do on a regular basis was super key. I mean, my coworkers still joke about that to this day. That was a Friday night, as you could have guessed. All right, so looking at the methodology at large, right? Like, this is a methodology. I wouldn't say like this is the only methodology, if you will. So all the way to the left, we have the threat actor. They're going to get initial access some way, somehow. It could be through phishing, could be a 0-day. Pick a 0-day out of this summer. It's been a hot 0-day summer for sure. or end day at this point, because a lot of them are still legit in organizations because they're not updating or what have you. Or what I've seen over the last 90 days with 2 cases I was working was an admin would be searching for a legitimate admin tool. They would go out to the web and download it. However, they were not downloading it from the legit place. One of them was a malicious Google ad that redirected them to a site hosting that binary. Another one was a typo squatted domain that kind of looked like it. But nonetheless, when they downloaded that binary, it gained a foothold in that environment. Credentials were exfilled. And there was a period of time where the threat actor didn't do anything, and then they walked right back in the door with the credentials, and it became a bad week. They're also going to look to compromise the domain. So how that's done? Well, going to try to get to the DC as quickly and as humanly possible to certainly dump the DIT, dumping credentials along the way. That's where the credential theft actually comes into play. The other aspect is they're going to look to do reconnaissance. What else can I gain access to, be it from the perspective of gaining a foothold there, or being able to identify potentially other networks that would be worthwhile. And we've seen some of that firsthand with NetScan, as you've seen in the video. And there's several other tools that are kind of like that provide the same capability and are notoriously used by threat actors. And then we get to the point of data discovery, data stage, and data exfiltration. And it's circled because that's where I'm going to focus a lot of my next part of our talk here. But they want to discover data, they want to stage it, and they absolutely want to exfil it. Why? Because that's the next part of that double extortion, right? I can't do the double extortion if I ain't got nothing to really threaten you with, if you will. And then after that, there's some form of ransomware deployment. And then, that's when it comes to light, something's happened, and they can actually have that conversation about those forms of extortion that are definitely happening. But let's focus on the 3 things that we have circled, right? So discovery, staging, exfiltration. This is not an all-inclusive list, but this is like a handyman quick reference, if you will, of things that are useful for analysis and things that have been seen used by threat actors more regularly. Again, not an all-inclusive list. Your mileage may vary based upon threat actors that you're used to dealing with or the business sector in which you typically respond. From a data discovery perspective, all of those things that are listed, those are great artifacts for us to really understand a threat actor trying to discover some data staging, and then data exfiltration. So I'm not going to hit all of those data points up under them. I will hit a couple, but again, more often than not, great starting points that I've seen in my experience. So data discovery, I can't exfiltrate what I don't know exists, and really I need to figure out what's out there. So quite often we see the domain controller also being the file server. Quite often we see open shares in the environment, people's profile automatically being mapped to the file share itself. All of those things just make it very, very easy for the threat actor. So one of my faves here is shell bags, right? Essentially, threat actors likely going to have some type of true interactive access. And as they're doing some of this data discovery and they're browsing around to folders, them accessing that folder is going to get written as a shell bag, so we can prove that they knew something was there or prove that they actually looked at this. Quite often what comes up is, well, what in that folder was accessed? That's going to be a different artifact that we would look at. But we would be able to say this data that's in that folder, whatever it is, was exposed to the threat actor. Now, the great thing about this too is even if something doesn't exist anymore, be it they got rid of it or something else continued to happen on the system as part of normal admin activities, we could still use this to prove that it was there at some point. And it doesn't log every interaction, but we at least get the first one and the last one. So below we see a parsed snippet associated with it. We see the absolute path associated with a subset of directories. We see when it was actually created, the first and last interaction associated with it. So we're kind of off to a good starting point in regards to that. Another one, jump lists and link files. Love it, love it. All right, so now I'm a threat actor. I've browsed to a folder that says Nandy Nan's Secrets, and Shell Bags is going to help me capture that. I did that, but now I see a couple of files in there that look pretty interesting based upon name. How will I know if they are something that I truly want? Well, I'm probably going to try to open them, and when we start to do stuff like that, we'll be able to get some jump lists and link files associated with it. The great thing about this is we'll see threat actors create a new document, copy paste their code or whatever they're using into that document, close it up, execute that. So then it starts to make it a little bit more difficult for us to really depict what's in there. But then they'll come back and delete it. Well, that's great, because when we have an actual link file, we can prove that it existed, that it was open, that's the link file, but within that link file, we're also going to get a subset of other data. So, right, so this is essentially our recent directory that's going to contain all our link files, and when I look at the one that says u.link, LNK, I knew that that file existed. I can see when that link file was created, telling me when it was actually executed, but I can also look in that link file and I'll be able to get the target file size, so I'll be able to have an understanding what the file size of the original file was. I'll be able to get the creation date associated with that, and we'll be able to get the path. Even though it no longer exists, that link file is going to contain that data. So that's great. This is a forensics goldmine, particularly when we're looking at people trying to do data discovery. Now, I had this up a minute ago, and if you've ever seen a window similar to this, maybe you had your little taskbar down below or your shelf that's been pinned to, and when you are able to hover over it, click over it, what have you, you see some of the recent stuff that is that shows up. All of that is jump lists, right? Things that have been previously executed now in that little shortcut menu, if you will, for you, that quick access. Those are jump lists, and we can use that to also help with our data discovery efforts. All right, let's look at some data staging. Notoriously WinRAR, right? This could either be from the perspective of them installing WinRAR or bringing a portable version. Generally, if they're going to bring a portable version, it's not going to be labeled WinRAR. They're going to do some other stuff associated with it. But they would utilize the command line for that portable version of WinRAR and not specify on the command line what files they want to add to the archive. Instead, they would put a list of files in a Word document, and through the command line actually point to that list of, point to that file containing that list of files to compress. From our perspective, when they're not doing a portable version, we do have some artifacts in the registry for us, so we can depict essentially the archive history, what was the name of the archive when it was created, and if for some reason they're looking at archives on the system and doing some extraction, we could be able to get that information as well. From a 7-zip perspective, we get something a little bit similar, and all of these things kind of shift slightly based upon the actual application. So we are able to depict what was actually archived in the sense of what that actual file name is, the extraction file path, and we can also get the directories that were browsed from a 7-zip perspective. And so our bottom screenshot is kind of showing that, never mind the actual blown upness, if you will, of our characters there. But we can see that from our arc history that this last one that was actually compressed was backup.7z on the desktop. Now, it'll continue to roll, if you will, or continue to add to that. There's a list of sorts, so it isn't just that it continues, or captures just the last one associated with it. MakeCav, don't really see people using this a whole lot from a local perspective, but I put it up there. As you know, make cab is built into Windows, so we can make cab files, which are compressed files as well. And then also to expand those things, i.e. Uncompress them, we can use another built-in Windows program called expand. Not a whole lot of great logging there, so we're really going to look to whatever we would use for any evidence of execution, any event logs of sorts that are associated with it. From a WinZip perspective, we can get really a little bit more here. So we can get a list of the archives, the data associated with it, when it was browsed, when it was extracted. All of that great information is shown for us. And just looking at the artifact that we have shown before us, we're really looking at what archives were being created, and this is all within the registry. So USN Journal, this is probably one of my faves between this and the MFT, which we don't talk about the MFT here. So USN Journal is going to be really our record of transaction records, if you will. So we're going to be able to see files and folders that were created, any updates associated with them, be it the file was renamed, the file was deleted, data was added to it, the file was closed. It is amazing, right? So USN Journal is the actual file name, USN JRNL. However, there's an alternate data stream of $J, and that's where the data is. If you're looking at $J on a system, you might note that it could be pretty small depending on the system you're looking at. But it's all about how that is being stored on the system, where it's a sparse file. But if it looks like it's only like 15 meg on the system, when you extract it, it's going to be much larger than that. But what we're going to get out of that, we'll get the name and path, we'll get the reason of the change, as I mentioned, the time. We'll be able to get the parent information as well. So what's interesting here is, when we look at this screenshot, it looks like the file name is secrets.txt.dat, right? So essentially it was a DAT file that they tried to make look like a text file, but .dat is still on there and the extension got picked up. The other aspect is we have the entry number. This is going to be the entry number of the MFT, the master file table. And then there's a column where it shows like the parent entry number. So that's going to allow us to understand the parent associated with it. All right, so this last one, data exfiltration. System resource utilization monitor. I don't know if Mark's in here, but Mark has a great tool to be able to parse this. I have a tool. There's a number of people who have also written tools, but this is a great gem, right? This was really brought about in, I want to say, Windows 8.1, and it's a part of a particular service dynastic policy. And depending on the system, we can get anywhere from 30 to 60 days of historical data. There's a number of things that this is going to provide for us, but the big thing that I generally look for in this actual artifact is to be able to understand bytes out, right? So even looking at what we have as a snippet here, we would have the computer, because we're doing this at large. We would have the application. In this case, you see the application is called Restic. Restic is a file synchronization data backup platform. So we can see we have 4 instances of it running. In this artifact, it captures to the database every hour. So within this hour of 1344, there were 4 instances of it running. Well, when did they start? This artifact isn't going to tell me. It's just telling me within that hour it was running. And within that hour, we see a number of bytes out. We see a number of bytes in. So now, as a forensicator doing this analysis, I'm able to say, yes, Restic executed. We knew that. There's other artifacts. But in terms of what data was exfilled, still working on that. But how much data was exfilled? Well, bytes out is like roughly 10.6 gigs, right? So that gives us a good measure to help really inform the client and really posture us to help confirm, if you will. So great artifact from a system perspective. Outside of something like this, to be able to understand the amount of data that went out, we would be looking for NetFlow or something of the like. That would not be on the system. So on the system, this is an amazing artifact. ArcClone, I mean, you've seen that in the Playbook. This is notorious. You can literally sync to over 70 different platforms. This is a great choice for threat actors because logging is disabled by default, which means they're not going to come behind and try to cut it back on. But the great thing about this is we do have a couple of artifacts that are useful for us. So that bottom image there, that is something similar to what they would use to upload data. You'll see circled, it starts with the word copy, so they're going to copy from the system going up. There's also a sync, which would allow it to go both ways. This just allows it to go up. And then we note victim one, right? Victim one is just what do we want to call the folder on wherever we're uploading, whatever that platform is, what do we want to call that folder, right? Now, there is a config file that we reference, and that's the one right above it. That is going to contain our username and password and whatever the platform is. So in this case, we see the user, right? So this is going to be on disk. We see the user, we see the password, and depending on the situation, that's an ability to be able to understand that more, right? We can work with partners who have a little bit more jurisdiction to be able to go against that and persecute it, right? Or, because Mendon has seen a number of cases all over the world constantly, threat actors typically don't, make a new one, right? So we'll see people reuse stuff like this. And while this is not an exact email, I have worked a case where money was being taken and literally the username was just business. I won't tell you what domain it was against, but that just tells you these folks do not care, right? In their mind, it's just business, and that's the way we should understand it. So WinSCP, two big things here. We can have our configuration stored in the registry. We can also have an INI file. Depending on how that's configured, we're going to get two different sets of artifacts that we could use. We see those things before us. Both of those are really, really great for us. Because they're really, really great for us, threat actors who are not necessarily in the know would use this as an option predominantly last. This is predominantly not a first go-to, if you will. Mega tools, my gosh, yes. So Mega Tools contains a number of things that we would be interested in. So there's an INI file that we can dump as part of a cache, and that's what we're doing in this bottom image. You see it circled. So we're calling upon Mega, LS is the actual item, and then we are dumping the cache. In this cache, we're going to get the other two screenshots that are shown up above, right? And what we're going to see is we're going to see the credentials, but then we're also going to see what's contained in that instance of Mega, right, associated with those credentials. So the first circle in that middle image, we see that there was Q4 2023 projections. That's what's contained in there right now. That second circle, type 0, that's going to be indication that it's an actual file. If it was 1, it would be a directory. And then right below that, we're going to be able to get the size. So all of this is an artifact kind of left over when we know things have been exfilled up to Mega. So, I could really talk about this all day in stories on top of stories on top of stories. Unfortunately, I don't have that time, and at some point, you're going to want to go home. So how do we really get to a great place here? There's a couple of things that an entity could do. I wouldn't say any of these are going to be 100%. You're never going to have to deal with it. But these are things that are super helpful. Some of them may seem very cliche in the sense that, yeah, I know we should be doing that. But I would tell you more often than not, entities are not doing it, or if they have implemented it, they have no measure in place to know when those measures are no longer in place, right? On top of that, there's a number of resources that are out there. So Mandiant, we have a containment and protection strategy guide, if you will, that talks about some of the things I just shown, but other things more in depth, if you will. Some of it actually tells you where you would need to make those changes and things of the like. And then our friends at CISA, they also have some great documentation up there. and of course the FBI as well. So with that, I'll pause here for any questions, and then I have a question for you all where I'm giving away something. Yes. Yeah, so the question, as long as I understood it from here, was in cases that you worked with rclone, you've noted that the threat actor has deleted the config file. The real question is, do we have any recommendations in terms of being able to capture the config file before it gets deleted or when that action is invoked? And I do not, right? But I will say there's other things that we can do that could potentially help us. And from a consulting perspective, every environment we go into is different. We know there's a chance that it's going to get deleted. There's going to be some great artifacts in memory. If we can get to the system soon enough, once it gets deleted, the pointer is removed, but we have a good chance of being able to carve it back. That's where a lot of my success has come from. If we're called in months later, well, then those chances start to die down. Yeah. Great question, though. Sir. Yeah. So, I mean, from the screenshot of their playbook earlier, it was Cobalt Strike, right? So it's like, oh, they're using Cobalt Strike. Well, that could be every actor in the world, and the watermark is probably the same because it's a pirated version. So a lot of those start to bleed over in some respect. Where the true, who is this comes into play is their actual ransomware that's running on the system and their node. Right, so that's where it really starts the point. But a great question. Sir. The question is, have I seen a proliferation of brute retell lately? I've seen it used, yes. It is being used more and more, yes. Great question. If you're not familiar with that platform, you probably want to do a little research associated with it. Brute retell, B-R-U-T-E-R-A-T-E-L. Yeah, and then put the word C2 behind it. Okay, well, let me ask my question then, and then I'll step away here. So I have a packet squirrel, nuts for networks. For anybody who can tell me, please raise your hand, who can tell me the playbook that I had, what group was that leaked from? Sir, this is yours. You are the new owner of a Hack 5 packet squirrel. Congratulations. Yep. All right, so with that, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to listen to me rant about kind of what I'm seeing. I'm going to go ahead and conclude. I'll step off to the side. If anybody else wants to talk, that's cool. But thank you for stepping in.